Only crumbling stone walls covered in thick layers of moss and tangled vines marked the location of the ancient well, a forgotten relic engulfed by time and nature, at the very edge of the tiny village of Greystone. Its dark mouth was once sealed by a wooden cover, which now lay rotting and crooked, barely containing the gaping chasm below. The villagers avoided the well for decades, discussing it only in whispered, superstitious tones. A restless spirit was said to reside deep within, a tortured soul confined to the dark depths, whispering through the wind and extending its hand to snatch away the unwary who ventured too close. The stories became darker as the years went by. According to some, the well was a portal to a different reality, one in which evil flourished and light was inaccessible. Even the most courageous hunters and villagers refused to approach after sundown, and children were cautioned to keep a safe distance. But the well persisted, a silent guardian on the village's edge, its mysteries hidden in fear and gloom. As the sun dipped below the horizon and bled red, a group of teenagers gathered near the village square one chilly autumn evening to challenge one another with wild dares and supernatural stories. One of them was Lily, a bold, inquisitive young woman whose fear of the unknown was outweighed by her fascination with it. She had heard the stories since she was a child, but she didn't think curses or ghosts existed. Until that night, the well was just an old, forgotten hole in the ground in her mind. As twilight turned to night, the group headed for the well, drawn by a mix of excitement and skepticism. With every step, the temperature dropped precipitously, as though the darkness itself were a living thing pressing down on them. With their twisted branches scratching the sky like skeletal fingers, the trees that surrounded the clearing where the well stood appeared to lean inward. The crunch of dead leaves underfoot and the distant hoot of an owl were the only sounds to break the dense silence that enveloped the group. The wind changed as they got closer to the well, bringing with it soft, melancholy groans that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. Echoes of suffering and loss that made Lily's spine tingle. The splintered and weathered wooden cover creaked menacingly beneath their feet. Lily took a step forward, her heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. She squatted down and aimed her flashlight into the glaring blackness below. Penetrating the darkness, the beam showed glimmers of water far below, its surface glassy and motionless like a mirror to another world. Then there was movement. At the edge of the light, a shadow moved quickly and silently before disappearing out of sight. Lily's breath caught in her throat. A cold, clammy hand suddenly grabbed her wrist as she reached out and brushed it over the rough wood. A shock of sheer terror shot through her veins as the touch was cold and unreal. With her eyes wide with terror, she jerked her arm back, and the wind roared around them, carrying a chilling whisper that twisted through the trees. "Leave before it's too late." The warning weighed heavily on the group's shoulders as they froze. However, the allure of the well's sinister secret was evident despite the fright that pricked their skin. A story turned into something horrifyingly real, and something waited in the depths of the old well, beneath the earth, restless, hungry, and ensnared by an unbreakable curse. The icy murmur appeared to disappear into the night, but its warning clung to Lily's bones like a chilly shadow. The ensuing oppressive quiet was only broken by her friend's jagged, erratic breathing as they stood motionless, each struggling with the mounting fear that encircled them like an invisible noose. But in spite of the terror tearing at their hearts, they were imprisoned by an unseen force that pulled them relentlessly toward the well's sinister secret. Lily's eyes were fixed on the wide-open chasm, where slight ripples shook the motionless water's surface far below, suggesting that something was stirring. Lily called upon her friends to assemble around the deteriorating edge of the well, their flashlights illuminating the approaching darkness with feeble circles of light, displaying a bravery she was unaware she possessed. As though the earth itself absorbed the fear that throbbed through the air, the stones beneath their feet felt colder, slippery with moss and something much less natural. Daniel's voice broke the stillness as they examined the ground carefully. It was a tremulous whisper that drew them all to a partially buried object amidst the fallen leaves and tangled roots. It was a tiny, leather-bound journal that had become worn and brittle with time, with a cracked and discolored cover. Daniel opened the journal with shaking hands and saw yellowed and fragile pages with scribbled handwriting that shook with fear and agony. The entries belonged to a villager named Elias, who lived centuries ago and was plagued by grief and love. The story developed as Lily read it out loud. Elias had developed feelings for a village woman, but their union was prohibited. Tragic events occurred as a result of betrayal by those who were unable to accept their love. His beloved was taken from him, thrown into the well as a form of punishment, and Elias was condemned to a torturous underground prison. In his last words, he described a curse ensnared by grief and anger, a restless soul imprisoned in the depths, longing for freedom and retribution. The shadows deepened, coiling and twisting like living smoke that clung to their skin and crawled along the ground as the air around them became unbearably cold. A low rumble that soon turned into a deafening roar caused the ground to tremble beneath their feet. A ghostly figure emerged from the well's depths, a pale, ethereal woman with sunken hollow eyes and a face contorted in unending agony. Her mournful cry cut through the night like a blade as her translucent hands reached out in desperation. The clearing was filled with the sickly smell of decay and a tangible sense of despair as the spirit's presence overcame it. As the vengeful ghost moved closer, her cries reverberating off the trees, panic swept through the group, with its weight serving as a reminder of the sinister past that had bound the spirit to this world. Lily gripped the cursed journal tightly. With their hearts racing, they turned and ran into the tangled forest, where branches clawed at their clothing and skin as though to keep them back, and their footsteps pounded against the chilly ground. The eerie chorus of the spirit's lament, which promised no relief, pursued them relentlessly from behind. Lily ventured to look over her shoulder as she arrived at the safety of the village outskirts. She briefly saw the ghost's hollow eyes watching them, an eternal sentinel of grief and wrath, as the shadow of the well loomed there in the swirling mist. The curse had simply followed them, a black stain on their souls, and it had not been lifted. The haunting of the well was far from over, and its restless spirit continued to gnaw, anticipating the day when it could take on new victims to add to its never-ending suffering.